Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the very last MSP Initiative Live for 2022. Man, has it been a year? And Pete's probably wishing he brought some Giants gear onto the call, but too late, Pete. I got you.
I'm happy with the record we have, George.
Okay. All right.
After the last couple of years, this is just a great place to be for us.
Sure. Well, you're technically still eligible for the playoffs. I think you're in that last wild card spot.
Right.
But we'll see. I got to play you one more time in Philadelphia. We'll see how that goes.
Yep, there's a couple key. Well, this weekend is winning in for them. So
we'll see. Who you playing on Sunday?
Indy.
Okay. Well, my boy Nick Foles. Let's see if he can get his act together there for a second game of the season.
Right now, it's unanimous that the Giants have the edge. So
okay. All right.
But we'll see.
All right. So MSPinitiative.com, this session and every other session we've ever recorded will be there under sessions in audio and video format. So pick whichever is best for you. We'll be announcing our plan for 2023 as we get into January. And we have these sessions that will continue to go on Tuesdays, Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time. And of course, online 24 hours a day. I think we're already booked into almost March. So full rack of special guests coming in and trying to help, give you guys some ideas on what's happening out there in MSP land. So our guest speaker, although he's with us a lot, Pete from Equilibrium Consulting. How you doing today, Pete?
I'm doing well, George. How are you?
I've said it a couple places, but this is the busiest December I can remember. I didn't even try and rhyme there, but it has been like a normal all the way through, just fully booked days, regardless of the holiday. I guess it's that crazy thing where Christmas and New Year's are on a weekend, right? And then like these are full weeks, which by the way is exciting. I'm not complaining about that, but man, a lot of stuff coming in at the tail end here.
Yeah, well, that's good, and that's a sign that things are not where maybe a lot of people predicted we might be. So,
well, listen, and I'm sure everybody will have an opinion on this. I see Keith Nelson jumped on here. How you doing, Keith?
Good. How you doing?
Doing well. We'll talk about your Cowboys in a second. I think my opinion, for good or for bad, is I think coming out of pandemic times, a lot of things pushed into the back end of 2022. Right. I think 2022 kind of started light, and then like things were pushed into Q2, 3, 4 instead of like equally spread out like it would in a normal year. And so I think there was a delayed reaction there. And so that's good, right? Like there are also a lot of things that got clogged up in the supply chain. We've talked about that many times. Now, all of a sudden, there's people that are overstocked. Orders that were back ordered for 6, 7, 2, 3 months, whatever it was, finally showed up. And now all of a sudden, it's all getting done in, kind of the crunch time. So, what I was saying on my side, right, just from a busyness factor is just net new calls, right? Prospective new calls, deals that are getting closed now rather than things that are being kind of delayed from earlier in the year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if it's just end of year time. People are sneaking it in because they have time, or, everybody's trying to balance up the books for the tax man. But man, it has been just amazingly busy.
Yeah, I would agree. And usually we slow down quite a bit because, we're not something that's a critical function during the holidays because nobody, pays attention to a lot of marketing unless you're a consumer, right? A consumer is out shopping and doing all their things, but the B2B business typically tends to slow down, and we've been asked to do more different things at the end of the year that are really driving, like grants that are out that are, deadlines by January 6th. So we're trying to advertise those kind of things in different places. And so it's driving us in different ways too. When you guys are busy on the MSP or on the BVoIP side, and that it drives us into getting some additional different type things done too. So it's good.
No, hey,
I like staying busy though.
Busy's good.
Yeah.
Busy's good. So of course, stay vigilant, guys. I mean, not to remember July of a year or two ago, but it seems like the bad guys like to come out during the holiday season. So, definitely don't fall totally asleep during this upcoming New Year's holiday, this upcoming weekend, and going into next week, because we're hoping that bad things don't happen. But just a good reminder there. And then looking back at 2022, big picture, kind of zooming out. I think I don't know if event fatigue is the correct standpoint or the correct words, but I think every event that could have come back to life tried to come back to life in 2022. Some were pretty well stocked, others, not so much. So I was watching all the feeds, right, from all the different groups and forums and all that other jazz, and I saw a couple people saying, "Hey, what's the event schedule for 2023?" And I was like, I don't know. Like obviously there's, we've done a lot of work here to kind of consolidate into like a master schedule, and it's over 100, individual events, in-person events for 2023 already in the calendar. Not that I don't think anybody would go to all of those, but I think I'm starting to hear the chatter that people are finding, starting to determine what their value proposition is, other than networking, which has a very high value, in my opinion, what their value proposition is going into planning for 2023. And as MSPs, what events they would, attend. So, I'm looking back. So then I look back at 2022, right? Keith Nelson, you've been to a bunch. I know you were taking the limo to the airport quite a bit in 2022. What were your top 1, 2, 3 events that you attended in 2022?
Well, I think the two that ConnectWise put on, their security offering and their IT Nation were really good. Otherwise, and it is just basically for networking and, saying hi to people. I think there's going to be a component change if legislation goes the way my crystal ball sees it, where part of the settlement the industry is going to have to do is education based. And I think that you're going to start seeing, ASCII's says they're going to do it. I don't know. I really don't follow that closely, but they say they're trying to go education based. I think that's going to occur just to keep the industry away from any possible litigation and
When
any
you say the
possible
industry,
legislation.
what are you keying in on there? That's a wide term.
We've talked about a lot. We use a lot of marketing terms that have an implied value that have no real value. And so you see people now moving away from MSP again. Now you see people saying IT provider or whatever the new term is. I think you're going to see some hope of legitimacy into what our offerings are.
So let me kind of recap for people that haven't been following, Keith. We've talked a lot about the over marketing, or maybe the gray marketing. I don't know if that's the right term. I'm trying to get into the right place. Basically, like, hey, you're saying something specific, but there's nothing really behind it, right? Kind of like when the word hosted changed into cloud, when the word IT service provider changed into managed service provider, then changed into managed security service provider, then changed into the next thing, right? So your concern is, and we use the story all the time, just kind of rewinding for anyone that hasn't listened before, that the word managed services provider really I think you said tracks back to an HVAC company, is the first company to ever use that term in a marketing way, correct?
Yeah, it's the state attorney general did that.
Yeah, in California, right? So yeah, I mean, marketing is an interesting thing. And if you go into Google, right, and either go into Google Maps or just go into the search engine and you search for IT company or managed services company, and then put city at the end of it, whatever it is, whatever geography you're in, obviously there's a lot of AdWords and SEO and map points, and they're all over the place, right? So
it's crazy, and it's getting more and more complex too, because of the diversity in terms and what they mean to everybody. Managed provider, right? It just take IT out of it and just say managed provider, and look at what comes up. And you're right, HVAC will come up, electricians come up, IT will come up. You will get all of these kind of trades per se that come up as a managed provider, because everybody has some kind of program now.
I was driving the other day, Pete, and I saw managed services provider for catering. And I was like, wow, that's interesting.
That sounds like Aramark taking a new slant at marketing, right?
I was like, huh, how about that?
Have you ever looked on some of the bulletin boards, like a tech tribe or something, or you see them all the time, where a guy says, I've been doing break fix, now I want to be an MSP, what do I do? And the advice that seems to come out is, oh, get someone to do your website. You know, that kind of things. And there's very little talk about what is it you're supposed to deliver. And I think that's where legitimately legislators are concerned.
I don't know that they can ever corral that, though, Keith. I think that's going to be, you know, again, the definition is really what the interpretation is by each small business, right? Look at your own organization and sales. What is a pipeline or a pipeline stage mean, a sales stage mean to somebody versus that? If you don't have a book of definitions, everybody has their own idea and opinion of what that stage might be, right? And what
I agree they won't be able
close.
to corral it. I totally agree with it. I think they'll legislate it. That's always been my argument. It's like they'll do the same thing they did with contractors, or they'll make a whole lot of different licenses. They'll make a whole lot of, you know, regulations and fees and testing. They won't solve the problem. So I just don't think we want their solution.
Well, listen, every state's different. Let's go to contractors for a second. In Pennsylvania, like basically a contractor has to effectively, their registration, them applying to say that they're a contractor, is basically just validating that there's insurance and making sure that they've, you know, like checked in with the municipality, right? So that they're, you know, properly registering permits. That's about it, right? Like, and maybe that's a low bar, but
well, I don't know about Pennsylvania. Ones we've used in the discussion on legislation have all been, they divide it up. You're a low voltage contractor, you're electric contractor. So now all of a sudden they've made you an expert. I say that loosely, but what they have done is collaborated with an academia education piece, created some licensing and fees and the issue is, because we study California's really in depth when looking at this model, complaints haven't gone down. That's the bottom line. Insurance went up, bonding costs went up, education costs went up, licensing costs went up, the cost to hire a contractor, because he's going to pass that all on to you, went up, but people still say they don't do any better work. And the state doesn't really resolve the problem. Basically, I think we just looked at the number, 87% of the state of California complaints were referred to the bonding insurance company. And you're going, what value did the state put in that equation except for overhead and cost? Because if you signed a contract with a contractor, his bonding, at least in California, his bonding and insurance companies on your contract, you could have called them directly without the state.
that's true.
So the state is not enforcing, the state is not making things better. They're making it more expensive and more cumbersome.
Well, I think part of it too, going away from academia, I think there's this thing called unions. And most of the trades have some very strong power at the very top levels of our government, right down into state. And unions, you know, will drive a lot of that legislation for the trades as to who's included and not. Now, George, I don't know if you remember, but probably about 10 years ago, the low voltage unions, they in Philadelphia were actually trying to make inroads into MSPs and get some MSPs or IT providers to join the union and protect their workers. And everybody was like, stop, get out, no. You know, and you know, so I think, you know, some of that is politically driven in lobbyists and other parts too, Keith, not just academia. And I think those unions have a power that in government with their lobbyists that nobody recognizes. And bottom line is like you were saying, there's a permit, there's a cost for a permit, and it's a way for people to, or cities or states or municipalities and the feds to collect the almighty dollar differently than it is, because they don't, like you said, they don't do anything. They refer it over to the insurance company, let the insurance company deal with it, because they don't have the resources to really handle what it is. They're not staffed. So they're collecting the money, but they're not really providing any value back for collecting that money.
And they're back basically a directory,
Yeah.
like a listing service.
Yeah.
But then there's cybersecurity, things that are coming down, right? And I know we've had a bunch of experts on this year talking about cyber insurance. I read an article yesterday that said that unless the federal government intervenes and basically handles insurance, cybersecurity insurance partially at the government level, that it may just fade away, meaning that the major insurance carriers, within a year or two's time may just say, not offering cyber liability anymore. And they're just going to stop offering it altogether, not even just charging more for it. It's kind of like, and if you've never been in one of these areas, you may have never looked into it, but flood insurance, right, is an actual government-run program. You can't just call up a homeowner's, policy and get flood insurance. It actually goes through the federal government because it's so expensive. Same, I think I read same with earthquakes, and you may know more about that, Keith, because you live in California. But like certain disaster insurance goes directly through the government side rather than through a private company, right?
Earthquake is co-written in California through your agent. You have to have it, but you're coming on a great point. As soon as we start requiring insurance, it gets too expensive. There's a reason California has uninsured motorists, because it gets too expensive, too cumbersome, and people don't, then they just check out. Yeah. And that's what I'm afraid is going to happen in cybersecurity, as when compliance and all the add-ons and the insurance and everything gets too expensive. I think then all of a sudden the marketplace says, you know what, this is too costly, it's too expensive, I'm just going to go back to the risk.
And that was in that article, Keith, that they think the average business will just opt out and just say, I'm not getting it anymore, I can't afford it.
Yeah, and I think that's what's going to occur. And we have to be careful of that in how we sell and present. You know?
But I think some of that's also going to come back to how you guys deliver compliance programs, right? So if you start saying, like the big move right now we're seeing in our customer base is all of a sudden everybody's a compliance expert. CMMC, ISO, New York State.
But I don't know.
A lot of these different things.
Business.
It doesn't, but it's a trickle-down effect, right? So if you're a second or third source supplier to somebody that might be supplying the government, and you might be a fasteners, you could be a screws and nuts company in manufacturing, they're going to push that down to you. And before, it was, if they were compliant, then it was assumed that all of their subs and supply chain downstream was protected. Not the case anymore. Now those prime contracts are pushing down to third, fourth, fifth level and saying, programmatically, we need to be assured that you're doing it because we're on the hook.
Wow.
So if you don't do it in yours, then we're doing it. So it's taking these.
But zoom back for a second. If I don't know if this is still the case at post-pandemic. I haven't gone back to look, but before the pandemic, it said about half the economy was small businesses, right? And then the other half was large businesses. And I guess the defining point was like 500 and above, I believe, is the definition of what's a large business. So if sub 500 organizations are half the economy, let's just assume that's still the case. How many of that 50% would filter down from the items that you're talking about? I'd say single digits.
I think you'd be much higher than that, because programmatically, a lot of people are doing. So companies like Salesforce, they might be supplying somebody a CRM that works within it. Now they have to get that because they're software or whatever, so they have to show their compliance. So a lot of the SaaS providers are going to feel some kind of compliance programs eventually, providing that the government really legislates properly. But the compliance programs are being pushed down into that 5 to 25 small business. And you're right, the 500, or I believe it's 21.5 million average over 3 years as a revenue run. So, but either way, these compliance initiatives are being pushed down. And so a lot of the IT companies, MSPs, whatever, are turning to saying, well, okay, if we don't deliver it, somebody else will, and we'll lose our stickiness, and then they'll erode our base. So, all right, now we're compliance experts. And to Keith's point, it's a scary point because now it dilutes the market for those that are really doing it well and are skilled and know it, or have RSOs and things, reporting service organizations in play to handle those compliance objectives across whatever spectrum. And they might have one subject matter expert, but they don't have all the pieces to handle the process, the procedures, the follow-on, the risk assessments, the remediation. They all do really great at the remediation because IT infrastructure is mostly at the key of a lot of that.
I mean, listen, we're going down a rabbit hole here. I remember earlier in the year we said, and people who are flipping, back to terminology, Keith, people who are flipping into, I'm just a consultant. I'm not managing anything. Okay. You're going to get this from this vendor, this from that vendor, this from this guy down the street, and this if you need wiring and all this other stuff, you're going to go directly to all these individual vendors. And I'll tell you your options, but you're ultimately not going to be buying that through me, right? I'm going to push that all out, and you're just going to be paying me for consulting time. If you flip back to that model, and that's not a new model, right? That was, back in the days before MSP was a marketing term, right? It was VAR or, whatever, right? Or, not even VAR if you're not reselling products, right? You were just IT consultant, right? In this case, you're just, worrying about the stuff that you're personally responsible for, the projects that you're putting your hands on. If you have these end companies, right, whatever size, one person all the way up to, whatever, if they're not buying through you, are you still on the hook? I would argue that a lot of your risk mitigation is by not offering those through you as effectively a distributor of those products.
I don't know. I still think you are you're supposed to be the expert just as much as a broker is in a real estate transaction, where he didn't live in the house, but he was dutifully supposed to inspect it. And he's supposed to know the signs of what you're supposed to know. And I think
the inspector is a third party. That's not the broker.
No, the broker is responsible, at least in California, is responsible. And when you start brokering and hiring and subcontracting for profit or not for profit, you take on some liability. And I think that court cases, and you can ask Bradley Gross, remember we had this discussion.
We'll have him back on.
Business law judges are looking at it. They're going to say, based on material representations, who should have known better? Those are those laws of unscrupulous advantage.
No, I get that. But like, if your contract is limited in scope, right? Like, hey, I've come in to do an assessment for you. Once I've done the assessment and provided you the results, I'm out, right? If you're coming in to do a specific thing, right? I'm not managing ongoing your network. You've hired me to do a specific scope of work. I come in, I do, and I leave, right? It's almost like a sub, right? Hey, I need you to come in and pour concrete for me and make some steps. Once the steps and the concrete are poured, I'm not responsible for the rest of the house. My steps are there. I'm moving on, right? You follow me?
Yeah, I think if you isolate it that tight and you're doing a specific, I think I'd be interested to know the language you need to communicate that in. Does it have to be non-technical and clear to follow? You may have a point there if that's what you're doing. I wonder about a guy, if I look at it a different way, who comes in and says, okay, I'm your managed service provider, and I'm going to sell you Norton antivirus, and you're going to pay for it direct, and then it doesn't work, and you go, well, you did that. In that area, I go, I don't think you're covered.
Okay, so like let's split that. Let's go down that one level. Ready? Hey, you need antivirus. Here are 3 options. They're going to say, what's your opinion? We're going to be like, well, here are the low, medium, high, right? Here's our recommendation. But at the end of the day, you need to do something within which you can afford, right? You pick which one, and you're going to go directly to that provider and turn that on. Now, I've already given you my assessment. I've explained the options, low, medium, high. Now, if you need me to go and implement for you, that's a separate request. You have to actually opt in for that service. You see what I'm saying?
That is an interesting way to do it. I'd really like to know how it does protect your liability. That is an interesting
I
model.
mean, I think the counter on that, though, George, would be, if you provide the assessment and you say this is what needs to be done and something goes awry, it still leads back to you because you provided the direction.
Well,
and you know how lawsuits are, right? They can name everybody that's downstream, right? And
sure.
And let the lawyers figure it out from there.
So number one, I think the main item, and I'll throw a caveat on here, right? What's in your agreements is important. And to your point, Keith and Brad Gross, and I don't want to talk for him, but he said it many times. The legalese, right? You can't understand the 8,000 page iPhone acceptance terms and conditions, right? It needs to be something that a reasonable person who's not technical can follow, right? Because if you go into a courtroom, that's part of the litigation process. Did they understand what was even being discussed, right? That's your laws of unscrupulous advantage type thing, right?
Yeah.
Hey, paint it in normal, standard, non-technical English and just explain, hey, we're going to recommend things based on you asking us to do certain tasks. You'll be presented with those things, and then you'll have the option to engage additional services based on that or not. And, basically, and listen, there's all sorts of tricks, right? Hey, if you want to sue, you can't sue more than the total value of the contract. I've seen that a lot. Or, hey, we're going to pass liability to the upstream vendor, if their product has a malfunction in it, or there's a manufacturer's defect, or there's some sort of issue. You need, their terms, here are their terms of service. You need to understand them. We don't manufacture those systems, right? Or, hey, if you don't follow the program, right? If we tell you need these 5 things and you said, no, I can't do 3 through 5, your options of the service provider should be, I'm just not going to take you on because I can't provide my service if you don't do everything you're supposed to do. Or, hey, I'm limiting my liability to, I'm just doing the 2 things that you've opted in for, and the 3 things that you didn't are you're holding me harmless, right? Not my problem. This is all legal stuff, which, here's my caveat that I said a few minutes ago. Since the rules change, you probably got to put out a new HR handbook every year, right? Because all the laws and all the states that you employ people in change every year, right? And they usually start at the first of the year is when all this new stuff kick in. I would say this, you probably need to review your MSAs more than on a 2 or 3 year basis. You probably got to review them annually. That's my, you probably don't want to spend the money to do it if you don't have to, but I feel like that's a safe bet, right? Your money's well invested if you're making sure every year that your MSA is kind of being updated to kind of keep up with whatever's coming downstream. What do you think, Keith?
Well, you also have to look at the scalability into your business of offering additional packages. So that's the one question that comes in. You're going like, there may be all these variants, but it may not make sense for me to do anything but you do what I say or find another MSP. Because that's how I can deliver service effectively, efficiently, and scale it. And it may not be worth it for a guy like me to take a one-off.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about scalability in a lot of different ways, but I'm going to go out on a limb. And Pete, you've talked to a lot of MSPs too. A lot of people took on a lot of side projects this year and last year because they were just trying to find revenue that wasn't coming in from other places. They probably went outside of their normal bubble, but now that things have kind of caught back up here at the end of 22, I don't know if I would continue that. What do you think, Pete? What are you hearing out there?
I think the same thing. We heard about a lot of projects that slid and started coming back to the brick and mortar. And when they got back into the brick and mortar, they realized the brick and mortar wasn't up to par. So a lot of projects came and a lot of cleanup did because there was a lot of reckless I won't say reckless. There was a lot of loose implementations that happened through COVID to accommodate that work at home, work remote. And so they spent a lot of time this last year cleaning that up, tightening it up, making inside and outside the brick and mortar work much better, right? And cleaning it up from a security perspective, and found holes along the way that they needed to keep, patching and pulling and changing and implementing different products. So the big search right now is for net new brands, for MSPs to find net new business. And what we found out through last year was that customers decided to sit tight with their MSP no matter how frustrated they were. They were afraid to make the moves because they may have heard that everybody was just busy. They needed to focus. The cybersecurity renewals were eating, and it was just more than they could absorb financially and resource-wise. So everybody kind of sat tight. So I think 2023 opens up a new door for some thinning out of the less mature MSPs. I think there's still some market consolidation because the money seems to have moved from the SaaS guys over to the MSPs and making bigger MSPs. But I think it provides great opportunity for some of the smallers, because there's going to be fallout of where they've been looking for, right, to get that new
there's the other side
business out there.
There's the other side of that coin, right? I mean, let's not forget the double-digit layoffs at a lot of big companies. That creates a lot of new businesses, right? A lot of new startup businesses in every category, and including MSPs, right? We say every 2, 3, 4 years, that bottom 20% of MSP land turns over, right? Guys close up shop, guys open up shop. Whether they can go back into corporate, once things clear up, or now that they've been laid off and, they're kind of sitting there saying, all right, what do I do with myself now? I mean, a lot of new startup businesses pop up, and I know MSPs that concentrate on just sweeping up new businesses, hoping that as they grow, they're growing right along with them, right? And then effectively they cater to the small guy, knowing that at some point, it's like Shark Tank, right? I don't need every investment to win, but if I get 1 or 2 out of 10, gold.
Yep. So, but there's no doubt that you can see the trend of consolidation. But the opportunity, I think, in 2023 is going to go up, because you're right. There was just a lot of project work. And I think you're seeing some of those coming to your way too. Like you said, you were busy, and, net new logos, how many net new logos came to your business this year versus, repeat business, because people needed something different.
I would say in a normal day, when I'm not out there, hanging out with Matthew Fox somewhere, which will happen. There's going to get beef cheesesteaks in the future, or
chicken sandwiches,
or eating cheesesteaks down by the stadium, or at a game. When you take all that aside,
chicken cheesesteak.
Well, hold on. I did add 20 to 21,000 plus new Chick-fil-A points this year. Let's not forget that. So when you put all that aside, I'd say I'm about 20 to 25 calls a week with prospective new, MSP partners in my company. I like being on the front lines, right? Because I feel the pain. I've been down that road. I know what hopefully their world looks like on the other side. And I've heard a lot of different things, but here's what I've seen. A lot of guys who are like, hey, I don't want to own every category anymore, right? Like before, the mindset was, if I'm selling it, I got to have everything down to the frame as my responsibility. A lot of people are coming back saying, I don't have the time for that anymore. Like I need to pick a partner that I'm confident in, and then make it their thing. And I got other fish to fry. So I've heard that a lot. I've heard, hey, I've tried so many different things because I was always looking for the grass is greener and I just never found it, right? And now I'm kind of trying to whittle down to something that I'm going to be able to standardize on rather than multiple vendors in the same category. And I've also heard, hey, I don't want to offer anything I can't make money on. So a lot of people come to the conclusion that they're not profitable in certain things that they offer. And they're like, if I'm not going to be profitable in it, I don't want to touch it anymore, right? So that's the general theme of, I would say, the last, 30, 60, 90 days of the people I've talked to, and of all sizes, right? Could be a one-man shop all the way to super mega roll-up MSP and anywhere in between. But the one thing's consistent is that, profitability, and we talked about this on the last call, which, by the way, that was an awesome call with the guys from Service Leadership. If you don't understand your math and you're just offering a service to offer a service, I feel like I feel like a lot of MSPs this year and last year kind of took on projects they normally wouldn't take on because they just were trying to find revenue in different places. But you can't, like, that probably doesn't make you money in the end, right? So profitability, like anytime you're adopting a new service, probably needs to be top of mind, right? I'm not saying, lean to the dollar and all else fails, right? It's, hey, I need to be able to make money, but also deliver a good service. And then the other thing that's worth mentioning is, price is good. It's in the top 3 questions of all, every time. But like, can I get access to support? And does the product actually work? Still take a higher priority, right? Because, hey, it could be the best price in the world, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. And if I can't get help, then I don't want, I don't want to have to go fight my vendors. And if I'm not mistaken, Keith Nelson, I've seen you pop out. I'm not going to say the vendor. I've seen you pop up in a couple forums where you're like, can't get a hold of anyone. What's going on? Who do I got to talk to get a call back? That's not the best place.
No, it's not. It's to me, it's not the cost specifically. Too many people say, oh, it's X number of dollars per seat. And I go, no, it's your labor cost to work with that company.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a lot, it has to work with the flow. And then when a company makes a mistake, they just have to ramp up and solve the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of things like, oh, it was on you didn't dig deep enough into our status page to find the fix. No, you have a major outage, you need to start being proactive and hold hands through that. I don't care if you charge more for that. I'll charge more for that.
I had an MSP tell me today, Pete, that they had an issue with the vendor. They wouldn't even update their status page. They didn't have anything to go back to their end customer and say, see, here's the problem. There's a larger issue happening. And like, basically couldn't get a hold of anyone, wouldn't get a reply back from anything. And I'm like, well, sounds like in the worst time when you needed some communication, you got a brick wall, and that doesn't sound like a good partnership.
No, it's and then certain ones are just going through so many changes.
Mm-hmm.
And then people are going, well, you should have called me. I go, I have a landing page. It tells me who my rep is. I'm supposed to remember all these other 50 people that work at that company.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look at what's going on with Southwest right now. That's an overload situation, no matter what. But you I don't know how you recover from something like that. But look at it, something as basic as like a cell carrier these days. They all have their AI bots handling support, and you can't get a person after hours anymore. So when do you have problems with your cell phone? If you're at work all day and you have a problem, you're going to solve your problem after hours. Well, that doesn't exist anymore, right? The Verizons, the T-Mobiles, the AT&Ts, you get in and sorry, we're closed at 6 o'clock.
Well, this comes back to the Frontier Airlines thing, right? Where they're just not, like, they're deleting their phone number. Don't call us. There is no number. Chat or die. And it's like, if that's what Southwest, like, so just to be clear, if everybody doesn't know, Southwest canceled 2,700 flights a day for like 2 or 3 days in a row from that storm from last week. And like, there were people that are stranded and still stranded up until after January 1, right? Like 5 days, 7 days, 6 days. Like, listen, whatever the weather issue was, by the way, hopefully not, it's very rare that the entire country is hit by one storm at once, but I digress. There was some feedback, I guess, from the pilots union. I read that their IT systems, funny enough, weren't modernized enough to handle the rescheduling. And that's why it took so long for human beings to like reschedule and move people around and move personnel around and then rebooked people, which I guess in 2020, almost 2023 is mind boggling. But imagine, going back to the Frontier Airlines point, imagine if these people couldn't actually pick up the phone and even stand in line and wait to talk to a human being. Oof. I can't, I couldn't, I mean, that's game over.
And more and more we're seeing that though, unfortunately.
a deeper story and a good lesson to learn from Southwest, which I won't fly because I don't like to fly like that. But if you look at their history, they hired a guy that the original guy that made him famous, the original CEO, came up through the ranks, knew operations.
Mm-hmm.
When he went to retire, shareholders and everyone got together and say, let's bring these finance guys in that know how to make us profits.
Mm-hmm.
And so until the latest change for the mid 10 years in there, Southwest was run by a CEO and a COO, both in the finance department, never went up the ranks, knew nothing about what happened in the front end, just knew that that cost me 55 cents and didn't make me any money, period. And I think that's what occurred. And so they look at it and say, why do I need to replace a system that seems to be working? And, you know, they kick the can, and it's that type of management. And then they also cut, they were very, what they like to say, labor efficient. I say void of service. You know, you cut everything and you say, now all of a sudden, you've planned a business for a perfect life. If there's sunshine every day, no airport cancels, no one gets sick, we are good.
Yeah. Is it me? It's just cyclical, right? When the economy is really good, how people differentiate themselves is on customer service, customer experience, customer delivery. And then when the economy is like not doing great, all of that gets cut, and it's all based on price. Do you see that generally? It's like a circle.
It's
It
based
is.
on price till they have a complaint. And that's what I always tell people. When your cell phone doesn't work, using your example earlier, and you call Sprint and they go, yeah, but I saved you $8 a month. You don't go, oh yeah, that's okay, I'm good with this now. And so, and I think that happens a lot in our business. And I tell it to people, remember when you're putting out the blue light, you're still expected to issue Nordstrom service.
I'll give you two examples, and George knows he's a little close to this. In the last 6 months, we've shipped 2 shipments that didn't make it where it needed to be, with two of the primary carriers. So we figured one failed, we would try the other, and we had basically the same result. But the end result was the same, right? The intermingling of one carrier, though, you could actually get to a human being that could log in and get to a logistics and pinpoint and actually look at camera pictures of the item being shipped into a container. And so they knew that it had moved to the container and the other one. The other carrier, the rep couldn't do anything. It was an offshore call center. I believe it was Philippines. Very courteous, very nice. But all they wanted to do was talk about, you paid, this is when you delivered, this is it. They couldn't track the package. They didn't know where the package was. They didn't know what it was. And I said, surely there's somebody you can escalate to. And they said, absolutely not. We have no connection to that system or those people. And there's no way I can even send or chat a message to them. And so I tried to talk through with them, like, look, the reason I'm calling you is not because I'm upset. I'm trying to solve a problem. And I think the core fundamental problem in customer service and the forgotten art of customer service is when people call you, they just want you to solve your problem. They're upset. But if you take it down a notch and you can solve their problem, they're usually okay. But people are not solving. They focus on the wrong thing. Like, okay, tell me your situation. Let's go. Let's not go backwards. What's the situation? And let's get you fixed. Like, let's get you. And that's what the one carrier did. Even though it didn't work out in my favor, at least I was able to talk to somebody, open a ticket, follow it with them, call back into that department, get a number directly to that department, and continue. Believe me, I lost a little hair on my crown. I got a little grayer. Dealing with claims now and things of that nature, but that was the difference. They had a better, and I'm still frustrated with the whole situation, but at least they had a customer service that I could get to tone down where I was. The other one, I think my wife could hear me downstairs going, "Are you kidding me? I'm just trying to solve the problem. Solve the problem with me. Stop telling me what you can't do. Is there something that you can do?" And the end goal is they had no ability at all because they had no connectivity. Back to
Wow.
IT, right? The
Yeah,
similar systems and no connectivity between a call center and an escalation point.
well, well, we've seen this over the years, right? I mean, we can Dell, HP, even Microsoft right now. I mean, you're not
Mhm.
talking to anyone domestically. It's probably outsourced to a large portion. They're only able to do up to a certain point, and then you need to talk to somebody on the US facing side if you can get to them, right? I mean, this is a kind of age-old story. And listen, there's a lot of MSPs that do outsource their front lines to a certain degree, right? I mean, there's a lot of people, and especially MSPs in outside, both in the US and in other parts of the world, right? They use, whether it's Philippines, they use, different regions that have lower, work cost of labor, but should have, skilled workers, but it's just never the same, right? It's the same reason why, Keith said, "Hey, I'm willing to pay more to get the level of service that I need, rather than just, look for the lowest price and do this," right? So,
But the problem is when those industries start consolidating and doing the same thing, it doesn't matter. Now you're paying the price because they've upped the price and they've lowered their service standards. And just like you were saying, that kind of circle where price versus service, eventually we've seen it with the HPs and Microsofts, where if you think about, they would take everything and they would move it down to like Guadalajara, when HP moved their whole call center down to Guadalajara. And it was a nightmare, right? But as customer service dropped and things got better for them, they started pulling some of it back into a US call center. So as a partner, you could get a different line of support than an end user, right? So you could escalate, move in as a partner quicker. But, that was only after they did this cost analysis to realize it was actually hurting their product sales because services were down. So if services are down, your reputation is going to hurt from that. And no matter what you do, being a marketeer, I can market your brand till the cows come home. But if your reputation on the street is not that good, it's hard for you to attract new brands and new logos into
that's all right. Keith Nelson, I just got a letter in the mail from Southwest yesterday. They're going to start offering alcoholic drinks on their flights. And they gave me 5 free drink tickets. If I gave you those, would you take a Southwest flight with me?
Nope. I just, you know what? I could tell you that I just don't like stress and flying. I'll just leave it at that. I just don't like it.
Matthew Fox will go with me. 5 free drink tickets. You coming, buddy?
I actually don't drink.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you got some chocolate quick. I'm good.
Oh, so 5 free chocolate quicks. You gonna come with me on the
5
Southwest?
free chocolate quicks, a cheesesteak, a chicken sandwich, and I'm still waiting on those teal M&Ms. Once you get those, I'm there. I'm anywhere. You name it, anywhere in the continental U.S.
Okay.
Teal M&Ms are easy.
See, see, they're easy. I've been waiting like 3 or 4 months, at least one business quarter on these things.
They always come. Just take it easy, man.
George, I would fly with you, George, but here's my fear. We would never get through TSA.
Yeah.
Between the two of us.
And George, look, I asked you that question yesterday about that keyboard that I built. I don't think that's going to get me. I don't think I'm getting through security or any building if I've got that in my bag.
Well, I give you 50-50. If it's me, no way. I'm going to get stopped every time. Doesn't matter what's in my bag. They'll manufacture the bag. Be like, do you have a bag? No, this is your bag. No, it's not my bag. No, we're going to open this bag. Why don't you come over here?
They got someone behind you stitching the thing as you're talking. It's kind of like wish.com quality, but it's just enough to peg something on you.
I mean, listen, and I got a black cloud, and my black cloud can be transferred in certain portions. Ask Pete. He's never been stopped in TSA until this year.
And I got to tell you, I got stopped and accused of having a container of quarters in my bag. And I wanted to know what a container of quarters really meant in code, because
Like,
I just don't think that a container of quarters is illegal.
They're like, oh, I got a fist, like a sock full of nickels. I can understand someone being upset about, but a roll of quarters or something, it's just ridiculous. I want to play Street Fighter. Leave me alone.
I think the limit's $10,000 in currency, right? After 10,000, they start to get suspicious. But like,
That's
I don't think you're gonna be carrying 10,000 in quarters.
That's
No.
George's pocket change.
And I challenged them to find the quarters, and I told them they could keep every quarter that they found in my backpack. And they didn't find one.
But they did find 30 Chuck E. Cheese tokens, and that was difficult to explain.
Yeah. Well,
I went through, I think I told George this one time, and I had in my carry-on, in my backpack, loaded magazine with home defenders. And I guess in California, a loaded magazine is actually considered a firearm.
Mhm.
And I'm walking through, and the guy just goes, "Do you have a CCW?" And I said, "Yeah." I go, "What an odd question. Why do you want to know?" And he goes, "Because you have a loaded magazine in your backpack here." And
so
he goes,
"And magazine with no gun."
With no gun.
It's still
okay. That would I would tell you that would raise some flags.
Yeah.
I'd be taking you to the room behind and asking you some different questions.
I can't even get through securities with like business cards in my back.
No, it was I'd gone shooting the day before, and I popped out my home defenders and used full metal jackets, of course. And I forgot to put one of my magazines back in my gun. No big deal. The guy was real nice about it. He goes, "You can go back to your car." And I said, "Well, I didn't drive here, and I think the guy's gone." He goes, "You can go check your baggage." And I said, "No." And I said, "You can have it."
Guy got some free ammunition. I can't tell you how many times I've I left a screwdriver in my bag for something, right? And then that'll definitely flag, and I'll be like, "You can keep it. It's okay. I can buy a new one." But yeah, I've been stopped for way less.
Do you remember how we used to go through, at least when we were putting in like dispatch systems, we would walk through with a whole bag of tools, saw,
Mhm.
and no one ever said anything.
I used to travel from New Jersey through Philadelphia to Japan with my tool bag in my hand, my tech rep bag, and nothing. I would go right through, no issue.
Yeah.
But I saw that they did pass a law the other day that is going to increase fines if you get caught with something going through. They say it's slowing TSA down too much. And so if you get caught going through and you hit the monitors, they're going to come, they could fine you right on the spot.
Can I fine them for misidentifying things and slowing me down?
Of course not. I mean, I feel the same way after the last year. I've had quite a couple experiences.
I'm gonna roll around with like one of those triple carbon invoice papers, and I'm just gonna hand out invoices, and every time I'm stopped, I'm gonna be really wealthy at the end of the year. Anyway, last thought going out the door, man, there's a lot of people looking for jobs out there. So I know we had a session earlier in the year, and we'll post like our top sessions. I know there's a lot of sessions we did this year, but one of them we talked about, hey, if you hire someone that's super overqualified, when the market gets better, they may not stick around, but or vice versa, right? I mean, there's both sides of the spectrum, but a lot of good people out there. And I know, like, if you ask MSPs, I feel like for the last 20 years, like, hey, what's the top 5 things you have problems with? Like, retention and employees are like in the top 5, sales, marketing, all's in the top 5. I guess now security is up there. So, listen, this is a time of year where a lot of people kind of do this, right? Some people leave, some people come. So I think, for the first time, unless you're like very targetedly hiring, it may be worthwhile to get some outside help, right? Vetting people and validating that they are who they say they are, and that they've worked where they say they've worked. And like, that way that you're working on a level playing field, because man, you thought, before all these people got cut from these bigger companies, it was like, man, people are just inventing work history. Now there's some really good people out there, but I think there's got to be some balance, right? As you're bringing new people into your organization. So probably for the first time in a long time, a light bulb went off and said, hey, if you're not target hiring somebody that you know, or somebody that came through somebody else that you know, you might want to, if you're going to the street and the job boards, might be worth bringing in somebody who does help with recruiting, because man, it is a tricky time.
I always wonder what the Tesla effect is going to be. I mean, the Twitter effect, where all of a sudden you're saying, you have a guy who's saying, we're not going to treat you like prima donnas, and bringing people down to earth, and if that will flow to other tech companies.
I mean, I'll be the first person to tell you, Keith, I was looking for, fill a couple of roles here at BVoIP, and I've gotten people from Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, and Google all in with like a 24-hour period. And I wasn't even really pushing anything, right? I just had posted a job rec for like the first time. And I was like, man, I would never, like 6 months, a year ago, you'd never see any of these people from these companies. But to your point, I mean, they're out there, right? And like, now you got to balance, right? If that's the right type of person.
Yeah, I wonder if they could tone down their demands. Be interesting.
I hear you loud and clear. So that's my last piece of George advice going into the end of the year. Obviously, be safe. I remember this guy who used to be on the Giants. He lit a firework and like cut 3 of his fingers off. I think he then played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after that. Don't be that person. So be careful, be safe, enjoy the holidays. Hopefully everybody, has something fun to do. If not, hang out at home. That's not a bad option. And we will see you back here on the other side. Again, Tuesdays, Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time, still doing that going into 2023. And then we'll tell you what we got baked out. We got some cool stuff we're working on, and, going to change the format a little bit of MSP Initiative for you guys going into next year.
And
Thanks
America's team is playing tonight, so everyone's going to be watching.
Oh yes, back to America's team real quick. I would love, thank you, Walter. I would love to if your team gets to it, please join me. Take your limo to the airport. You can fly out to Philadelphia. I'm going to bring Matthew Fox down, because then he can get his teal M&Ms in person and his cheesesteak. And then you can watch your team play in South Philadelphia. What do you think?
I definitely will do that.
Okay.
I'll bring my son.
It's recorded. We have it live. Now, I'm going to give you some ground rules when you come, but we want to make sure that you're safe. He's like, what are the ground rules?
I need
gear.
to wear a t-shirt that says I'm not Santa. I know.
Yes. No Santa gear and
no battery throwing. No battery throwing.
No battery throwing. No, can't do that. Can you come in non-Dallas gear? Can you do that?
They would really be yeah. I mean, there's guys, you go to Texas Stadium, there's guys in all kinds of gear.
It's Philadelphia. It's not Texas.
Yeah, not in Philadelphia. It's not that friendly.
Yeah. So those are some bullet points to think about before you accept that offer. But
and of course, there could always be the final one that you got to fly Southwest and use some of those drinks.
Oh no! Won't do that. Definitely will not.
Hey, George, I just want you to know, George, I only so far have accumulated 4,922 points in chicken this year. So.
Man, you're behind. You need to eat more chicken.
I mean, I got just a couple days but I don't think I can eat that much chicken.
I mean, all I can tell you is the Chick-fil-A being only like a mile down the road from me is very convenient.
Yep.
That's all I can say. All right, guys, have a good New Year's celebration, and we'll see you back on the other side. Welcome to 2023.
All right.
Have a good
Take
one,
it
folks.
easy.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.